Welcome to the MC Rapology podcast. Now, this one I'm doing is on Young Buck. Now, as a lot of people might know, a little bit about the background of this. So, Young Buck was actually taken to court by the IRS. He was accused of not paying taxes for certain years. He didn't file a tax return and had a revenue stream coming in. Now, some of this revenue stream that Young Buck had coming in during these certain years, he didn't lodge a tax return. He had money coming in from royalty checks, from doing songs that were released on different platforms. And he also had tour money coming in and was also contracted to 50 Cent. Now, there's two issues here that occurred, right? Young Buck had a contract to deliver certain products, certain music with 50 Cent. So he had a contract where he was obliged legally to commit to releasing a certain amount of music that would turn and generate a certain amount of income. Now, primarily the IRS went after Young Buck because he failed to lodge tax returns in the year 2014, 2015, 2016, also 2017, 2018, and 2019. Now, the IRS was owed $415,892.04. Now, they also alleged that between 2017 to 2019, Young Buck was making just under $100,000 a year from his music. So things started slowing down. So this kind of coincided with, Young Buck leaving the powerhouse that was G Unit Records under the guidance of 50 Cent. So things started slowing down. Now, the $415,000 tax bill that Young Buck owed the IRS pursued Young Buck. He was forced to sell all his possessions, his property, even the rights to his name. They tried to auction off, and I think what happened, one of Young Buck's friends purchased the rights to the Young Buck name and saved his name, but everything else was lost, was basically repossessed by the IRS and sold off so they could recoup some of the money that was owed to them. And, if I do the initial sums, so we know, that what the IRS was owed. We know that, if we're looking at the tax rate that Young Buck was paying, it would have been the highest bracket at 37%. Now, if we go to extrapolate here, we can calculate just how much money Young Buck made during 2014, 15, and 2016, because we know between 2017 and 2019, he made $300,000 in total, right? Because he was making just under $100,000 a year, but we rounded it up. Now, if we work out the $415,000 tax bill component on how much money Young Buck would have made to owe that kind of tax bill, we divide 0.37 into $415,892.04. So that brings us to a figure of $1,124,032.54. Now, we extract the $300,000 that was made between the years 2017 to 2019, and that leaves us that he's made $824,032 between the years 2014 and 2016. Now, this was a complicated situation because Young Buck, he didn't pay his tax. He didn't understand the financial responsibility in paying tax, earning that amount of money. So this money was going straight to Young Buck's account, and he was overspending, as a lot of people do in the rap game that don't have the financial knowledge to handle their tax affairs. It's unfortunate the situation that happened, but it does happen to a lot of people, not just in the rap world, but people that come into possession with a lot of money. They're not used to having a lot of money, and their revenue stream increases. They do not do the right thing, and then they just ignore the problem until the IRS come knocking. And that's literally what they do. The problem's left alone, and then until eventually they rock up with warrants from the court to seize property, assets, anything they need to recoup their money. And in this case, that's what happened, and it was dragged out through courts, lawyers charging exorbitant fees, as they do, and was eventually settled. But it was unfortunate because young Buck went through the process of nearly losing everything. Now, the reason why young Buck had to declare bankruptcy was for a separate matter. He filed a Chapter 13 bankruptcy because he owed 50 Cent an amount of money. Now, 50 Cent alleges that he was owed millions. He actually sued young Buck for $10 million. But what we can confirm is that 50 Cent lent young Buck $300,000 to try and help young Buck and keep him afloat. Young Buck managed to pay back $130,000 of that money. But then 50 Cent went one step further. He felt that, young Buck no longer wanted to commit to the contract that he was given for G Unit Records. He didn't want to, release any music and fulfill his contract. So he was sued by 50 Cent for a breach of contract of $10 million, which is an excessive amount. But that's what happens to an artist who refuses to follow their contract. When you sign a contract in the music business, some of those contracts, you have to read the fine print. And I don't know if young Buck knew the contract he was getting into when he signed to 50 Cent's label. Now, there will never be another G Unit record. This was an absolute disaster from the get-go. Young Buck, unfortunately, he lacked the financial knowledge, and probably didn't understand the terms of the contract. He had money coming in, and he probably just loved making music. But there's a whole nother side to the music game that people have to be aware of if they're an artist making money, and that is to pay taxes. Now, 50 Cent is notorious for going after people that owe him money, and he has, given money away to people before, and it doesn't matter if it's $1 or $100, he'll go to any extent to chase it up. As he did with the comedian Michael Blackson, who, owed 50 Cent a bit of money, maybe it was around a few $1,000s, and 50 Cent sent goons to go chase that down. Now, the moral of the story is never get credit off anyone, especially 50 Cent. Never sign a contract without reading it, and always pay your taxes, and then you can avoid this kind of problem. Now, it's unfortunate, but young Buck, he got his Chapter 13 bankruptcy accepted. It got him out of the contract with 50 Cent. He didn't owe 50 Cent any more money. 50 Cent lost about $170,000 that we know of in the process. But the bridge was burned between the two, artists. And it's unfortunate, but, never lend someone money that doesn't have, if you're someone like 50 Cent, you have to make sure you're lending money to people that, have a sound business model and are doing something positive with the money, not, blowing the money as it seems in this case. Now, it's unfortunate, but that's what happened. Now, everything now has led up to young Buck being able to put himself on the right track, and he probably has a better financial understanding, and he probably pays his taxes on time now. And, he's building up his revenue stream, and this is the first year that young Buck has been able to build up his finances, and he's now worth $100,000, his net worth. So I'm sure he will go from strength to strength and continue building up his empire. He's probably learned a lot from this. He's made a lot of mistakes, lost a lot of property, assets, but he's bounced back all right. So, and he can do it without 50 Cent. He can get far, and he just goes the independent route. He still has the name. The brand name is what counts, and he will continue to sell records, and he'll continue to, get partial money from records that he's released in the past, and records that he releases in the future will draw him income. But anyway, that's my rundown of what happened with that. So just to break it down for those that don't understand, I'm MC Rapology. Subscribe to this channel, and peace.